Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into the Odd Thoughts podcast. At the Odd Thoughts podcast, we like to talk about the everyday odd thoughts, have conversations on relatable topics, and discuss whatever comes to mind. My name is Gunther, and I am your host. Welcome to episode 27. For episode 27, I wanted to start off with talking a little bit about public speaking, kind of the nerve wrackingness of getting in front of a crowd and talking about whatever, whether you know a little bit of something, whether it's a big crowd, whatever the situation may be. Then I transitioned then I transitioned into talking a little bit about some scary scenes in non-horror movies. Those kind of random jump scares, those random spooky moments that happen in non-horror movies. Then I wanted to transition into talking a little bit about learning a lesson, or lesson learned is how I'll title it. Often, with a lot of mistakes or the mishaps that we have in life, there is something to learn from it, a lesson to be learned. Not to say that we don't know anything or to say that we're stupid or something like that, but learning a lesson can often help and better us as people. Then I wanted to end it on talking about an article that I had read. It was an article that was talking about polyphasic sleep cycles. So the varietyness and different sleep cycles that people go through, maybe the longer rest that you have at night, the 6 to 8 hours in the middle of the night, or maybe you're like a 3 hours every few hours type person, taking little micro naps or whatever it may be. But if you want to listen to any of that, then I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you for stopping by. Please enjoy. Appreciate everybody coming in and didn't listen to the podcast. I try to do my best and just try to talk about whatever it may be, that whatever it may come to mind. And I know that our emotions run strong. We can have some feelings that feel like they can take over and cause a lot of stress in our lives, affect how we think, affect how we function, do things we don't want to or don't mean to do. And feelings can last a long time. These emotions that come over us can always last for an undetermined amount of time. And we're not always going to have an emotional ability to things. Feelings always come in these waves, and so we don't know if we're going to handle it at the time. But we do know that feelings are pretty normal. Emotions are normal to have. We have the ability to stay strong through these emotions, and if you do fall apart and sometimes when your emotions do get the better of you, that's not weakness necessarily. That doesn't mean that you're unstable. It's if you're never someone to express your feelings, or you never really experience feelings too often, it can hold you back. If you don't have people to talk to or have things to like let it out, then it could just eat you alive and make you feel way worse than how you felt before, or what you current initially were feeling. Maybe even make it more uncontrollable. We don't know how things are going to always go, and we don't often always tend to see the same kind of emotions being relayed onto us. But I think it's important to let yourself feel, to let yourself express, to not hold anything back. It's cathartic in a way to express your emotions, and sometimes it can be a little unstable. There's no doubt about that. We don't mean to take it out on people often, and we don't mean to be so expressive, but you got to have those outlets. You got to have the ability to talk to someone or talk to yourself in a certain way. Find a little peace, distract yourself in a certain way, because we're all affected in our own ways. We are all affected by emotion, and we all handle it differently. But you are stronger than you think. And I think everybody needs to know that is that emotional instability doesn't mean weakness all the time. Just because you're feeling something so strongly doesn't mean that you're pathetic or that you're wrong for doing so. We don't always have experiences with this stuff, and like I said, we don't always have it expressed onto us. So you're just doing what you're doing. You're a strong person. But nonetheless, thank you for coming by. listening to my podcast. I'm doing okay. I've come to a realization that I feel a little bit better about myself. Maybe that's not necessarily a realization, but I'm starting to feel more confidence in myself. I know for a long time I was so like caught up in my emotions, and I suffer from anxiety, and I suffer from depression, and that stuff eats me alive, and it makes me feel incapable, and it makes me feel like I'm not doing a lot in my life, and it just always eats me so much, and it eats at everything I do. But I've come to kind of realize lately that that's not what defines me, and I kind of have realized that I have a lot of great things about myself, and it's such an important thing. I think through doing like the podcast and doing a little bit of writing and just a couple of these other things that I've kind of realized that I'm not bad at these things, that I have a purpose, that if I continue to just express myself in multiple different ways, that it makes me feel better. And that I realize a lot more that I talk to myself so badly for so long, and I still have such poor, self-talk, and I talk down on myself, and I hate on myself a lot, and I don't need to do that because there's not a lot to hate on myself about. If it's worthy, if I act a certain way, and I'm doing it, like I said, acting a certain way, then yeah, I can understand that intentionally acting a certain way. Then I think I have to be on myself, and I think it's important to remain on myself about those things, but I don't have to jump down my throat when every little thing happens, when every little time I feel anxiety or every little mistake I make. I don't have to jump down my throat and pound myself about this stuff. It's I think that's a lot of like that's like a trap that a lot of people fall into, is that you kind of just hate on yourself when you're not doing something, or you're not doing something so and so properly or whatever, or you're not at a certain place in life, or you just hate on yourself for no reason. Yeah, I just hate on myself for absolutely zero reason. And it's only ever affected me negatively, is what I've seen. So I've come to a realization that a little bit of that self-talk is so important, and I need to take away those ideas. It's hard because I've talked to myself so poorly for so long that it's kind of hard to like reiterate the thoughts that I have, and but I'm doing it. The things that I've learned about myself that I'm positive about and I've gained more confidence on is it's only helped with that self-talk, and I don't want to talk down on myself anymore, and it's gonna feel weird right now. I know in this whole transitional thing that I feel like it's gonna be like unwarranted confidence, or it's gonna feel like egotistical, and I'm like propping myself up for no reason. But I know that I'm okay, and I know I got these good qualities about myself. So I show up for myself every single day. Something I try to reiterate to everybody so often. Be excellent to other people. Love yourself. Just do the little things. But yeah, I'm doing okay. Like I said, I hope y'all are doing okay. Let's move on to talking about some topics. Let's jump into episode 27. Talking in front of a group of people can be pretty nerve-wracking. No matter the size of people or who are in the crowd, thoughts can come racing in when the spotlight is on you. It's not easy being the center of attention, even if it's just for a moment. Your ideas, your words can get jumbled up, and things can fall apart pretty quickly when you're speaking in front of a bunch of people. But you can overcome that for sure. I know sometimes for me, it's not always easy public speaking, even if it's like for a specific purpose. When you were in school doing an assignment, or you're like, people want to listen to you, right? You have something that people want to hear. It could still be pretty difficult. Not everybody's built for that kind of thing, and not everybody's necessarily standing in front of a crowd talking to people, right? It doesn't seem like it's necessarily your day-to-day thing. So talking in front of others, public speaking is something that I thought would be kind of fun to talk about. And like I said, it always feels like that it doesn't matter how large of a crowd it is. It could be 10 people that, you're a manager talking to your employees about whatever, or it could be maybe something a little bigger. When we're in class and stuff like that, 30 people when you were in college, that sometimes those lecture classes get to like 100 people or something like that. So, and even with the people in the crowd, it could be your family and it feels pretty nerve-wracking. And then it feels like, at least for me, strangers, that just seems impossible. Maybe a little bit, maybe there's a little bit of a pretense that I kind of want to be perfect, or, someone speaking to others, they want to be heard, they want to be understood. And often, we're prophetic in certain topics. You're not going to be very versed in everything, but there are certain things that you know. And so maybe if you got a chance to talk about something you knew a little bit better, it would be possibly kind of easier to to talk in front of other people, to public speak. Oh, but maybe, the chance that you know nothing. Also, maybe you could think about like if you don't really know anything on it, you kind of could just wing it, and maybe you don't feel necessarily bad that you're speaking gibberish, just jumbling up whatever. Like I was saying that often I want to just be heard or understood. So when I know something, I'm just trying my best to relay it to other people to the best of my abilities. Um, I remember in school it was hard because it was always like forced. I remember taking like speech class and you having to give speeches because it's part of the class, or in other classes given presentations, you're forced to do so. When it's kind of thrown on it, not necessarily was thrown on you, right? You had time to prepare, but I don't know how you're necessarily going to prepare to speak in front of people besides speaking in front of people. That's something you can't really practice. Like you can talk in front of a mirror all you want and get good at the speech itself, which does help. I think if you've rehearsed it to a certain amount of times, then you just kind of get back to the script type thing. But talking in front of a mirror is a lot different than talking in front of a group of people. So, but you want to do it, I feel that would be easier. 100%. When you maybe like you're hanging out with a group of people, right? Or you're hanging out with family, or you just have something you want to tell people, or there's a certain group of people that want to know something, and hey, you happen to know that that thing. So that makes it a little easier, I would suppose. When you want to do it and when there's that need. But kind of the mindset behind public speaking is that you gotta have a little bit of that self belief. You gotta believe that you can do it. That you obviously have a purpose that you're in front of everybody, and there's a reason that you're talking to everybody. Hopefully, whatever justified reason that is. So you gotta kind of just let it go. You know that you're meant to speak in front of people, so you gotta do it. And often I think rehearsing, like I said, rehearsing is perfect. Go over it a little bit, or if you're versed in something, then hopefully it's a little easier. That's something that with my day to day life is when I'm curious about something, I like to research it. I like to become as versed as possible, or to whatever extent I really can. And then when I get a chance to tell other people, it's quite awesome. But thinking about telling a lot of people about something, that's a lot of pressure. I just want to be able to relay everything that I know perfectly. And often I think that like if I'm going to speak in front of others and I got this kind of crowd or group of people, I feel a little judgment sometimes. But maybe that's a little bit of a predisposed, bit of a delusional thing to think is that people are judging me. Maybe some people are, but I think that's kind of lame. But at the end of the day, maybe more so I'm judging myself and I'm just kind of predisposing, like I said, those ideas onto other people. Maybe like I think I'm like talking too slow, or oh, I missed saying this thing, or I messed up on this word, And so then the thoughts start racing in. Then I start kind of thinking, oh man, I'm not doing good, and oh everybody's looking at me. They thinking, oh how stupid this guy sounds. Oh look he's drowning up on stage. Look at him, you know. I don't think that's really how it is. If you're that type of person that's just looking for people to mess up on stage, then it's a little bit of a weird mindset to have. But being a center of attention isn't easy. Having that spotlight on you for even just a few moments, you know, a few minutes is it's quite difficult. You want to try to speed through it as fast as possible, but nonetheless, you know, people are looking at you and they're tuning into what you're going to say or what you're going to do. So, you know, you're going to mess up probably. I think that's a big thing with public speaking is that you might have a perfect speech once in a while, or you know, you're so good with something and so affluent, and you know, you're so involved in whatever you're speaking, and everything comes out just the way you want it to. But I think most of the time you're gonna stumble, you're gonna mess up a little bit, forget what you said, re-say things that you said, but that's all part of it. I think that's like the nature of talking, even the nature of like conversation is that it's not perfect. Conversation really is never perfect. So why wouldn't that make sense when it relates to speaking in front of others? It's basically like a big open conversation, except it's one versus bunch of other people. Whereas, you know, a normal conversation might just be one person and another person, or a couple people, not one person talking at a bunch of other people. So doing your best. I know I keep saying so, but it's the only way I can think about transitioning to like the next point on my topic. But you should just do your best. Nonetheless, if you mess up a little bit or something that you don't really know much about and you feel like you're forced to do it, just do your best. Just go out there, talk, just say the words. And not everybody's going to be perfect with that kind of stuff. And being like a perfect speaker or having like the perfect ability to, you know, say everything that you want to say is hard, especially like in a time constraint, or you know, maybe you're not allowed to talk about certain topics, so it kind of limits you on what you do. So but you could say it at your own pace. I think that's a big thing too, is taking your time with it. If you maybe know a little bit more about one specific part of a topic, then that's okay to feed into a little bit more. The kind of thing is like you want to kind of get to the end goal. Make sure you're not missing out on the important things. Don't sit there and start talking about them random things, but just make sure that you know that you're prepared. Just relax. You know, you prepare yourself, you're rehearsing or whatever. That should be some sort of relaxation in that. You should know that you've done the work, and sometimes it puts a little bit pressure because you've done so much rehearsing and you kind of know the script, but and then you get when you mess up, that can throw you off a little bit, but you know the script. So just get back on it. Go back to the last point that you felt like you messed up on and keep it moving. Ignore others, right? It's always the proverbial picture that you're the only person in the room. Picture that you're just talking to nobody. That's one way. I think there's probably a few different ways, right? That that can help you with the public speaking, the anxieties of public speaking. Yeah, just picturing you're by yourself, you know? That's not bad. I don't think that's bad at all. A little a little hard. I get like sensory issues, you know, so I can't help but to feel that everybody's staring at me, but I think with me, I try to just think about like that I'm here for a purpose. That's another, like I said, that's a big thing is you could always just think that if you're public speaking, there must be a reason you're in front of this crowd or in front of this little group of people. They're listening to you for a specific reason. And through like public speaking, through giving these speeches in front of others, just talking in front of a group of people in general, you know, I think that helps a little bit with just being better at expressing yourself, expressing ideas that you have. When you kind of in my mind sometimes when I'm struggling with an idea and I'm kind of overthinking and stuff like that, I quite often will find I'll like try to say it out loud. I'll have like a conversation with myself and I start to think about it just I try to hear it, you know. I say it into the world so that I can actually hear what I'm saying. And so I think with like public speaking, you know, you kind of hear how you talk in a conversation and you know what pace you talk at if you're a little quick or if you're a little slow and you know how you talk. You start to learn it a little bit better and you can key in on those things. You start to transform the way you speak a little bit, not to yourself necessarily, but to others. At the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter. You don't have to be perfect in front of people, but I think it's okay to be, you know, affluent at speaking in general, whether it is in public or not. I think it's always great when you have a chance to talk in front of other people, especially when it is something that you want to talk about. It makes it hard, or it makes it, I mean, sorry, it makes it easier. But nonetheless, public speaking is hard. Getting in front of other people and saying whatever it is, speaking facts, just talking about something is difficult. It's very anxiety inducing, nerve wracking, and you're not always going to be necessarily capable. Maybe a couple people and you feel a little bit nervous, and maybe it's 100 people and you don't feel so bad. But public speaking is something that everybody, I think, can learn. I think you can overcome that fear of speaking in front of other people. I don't know necessarily what the outline is for that. What's the best way to help you yourself? Rehearsing, kind of imagining that everybody's there for a reason. You know, you're talking to them for a reason. Just picturing that. Maybe picturing nobody's in the room with you. But yeah, public speaking is something I struggle with still till this day. Let's transition on to the next topic. When you're watching movies at home or in a movie theater, you tend to know what genre you're getting involved with. Sometimes you can even tell how the whole movie is going to play out if you haven't seen it before by just that genre. But once in a while, you get a little bit of a crossover. Maybe in a comedy movie, you get a extremely sad moment, or in an action movie, you get an extremely funny moment. One thing that's for sure unexpected is when you get that random horror or random like jump scare in a movie that's a non-horror movie. You get lulled into that safety of a comedy or the safety of an action movie, safety in an action movie, and bang, with some big old jump scare that just gets you, or just a general just spooky moment that doesn't belong in these movies. I love that sometimes you get lulled into watching some of these movies. You know, I'm expecting jokes when I'm watching a comedy movie, and I'm expecting a lot of action-packed moments in an action movie. But then you get that random horrifying moment. And as a kid, it was always funny and a little bit, you know, even till now, I guess, really even from being a kid to now, movies still do that type of thing. And I don't know necessarily why. It feels sometimes it's a little random or it just is like a good like diversion and feeling. You know, like I said, you get a little lulled into the movie and you think you're kind of watching a specific thing and all of a sudden, boom, scare. I love scary movies, but when I get scares outside of scary movies, I'm not hating. I definitely I enjoy it. I enjoy the crossovers. But that got me kind of thinking about few like scary scenes or scary moments in non-horror movies. Plenty of them, like I said, from a kid till now that I some of them I remember pretty vividly. There was a couple I picked, let's see, one, two, three, four, five. And a couple of them I kind of vaguely remember, but three of them for sure. And so I listed them, I think, kind of like as most like playful, not as horrifying, all the way to like definitely like shouldn't be in this movie, horrifying to at least to me, almost you know unsettling in whatever you know what I'm saying. Try to list it as most non-scary or you know non-scary to most scary, yada yada yada. But the first one I had on my list was in Toy Story. Remember in the first Toy Story, there's a scene when Buzz and Woody are in Sid's room, and all of a sudden, out of the shadows comes the flood of the misfit toys. All the toys that Sid has like ripped apart and put back together in random configurations, misfit toys. As a kid, you're kind of thinking like this is a happy moment. This is or like the whole movie's pretty happy, and it's sad that Andy's leaving, and don't make sure the toys don't get left behind. And obviously, we know that Sid's a terrible character. So when you get to look inside his room and you get to kind of be inside his mind a little bit, kind of spooky. It was such a diversion when I was a kid. I remember being like, "Oh man, I love Buzz Lightyear. I love Woody. I love all these toys. Slinky. I love all of them." And then you get that scene. Now, I admit that after you kind of get there, it's a little spooky when they all show up and it's played to be a little bit spooky. In a kids movie, it's played to be that way, but then like they help out Woody, right? Like they like play a trick, they play the prank on Sid and freak Sid out and turn the tables on Sid. So then it becomes kind of like non-spooky. They get a little bit of a they get like a mini redemption arc, I guess, huh? But definitely not something that was, expected. Especially and it's a little unsettling with that late 90s mid to late 90s animation style. It was very like plasticky and that kind of uncanny valley look, very very spooky, and it was just unsettling. As a kid it was just scary in general, but now you kind of look back and it has like another level of unsettledness. Yeah, but the next one I had on my list was from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. There's that scene when he's like hitchhiking and or yeah, hitchhiking, right? And then he gets a ride from Large Marge is the character. And the random like jump scare. I forget how the scene goes down. This is one that I didn't remember super vividly, but I was like looking up like scary scenes and non-horror, and that one popped up in a couple different lists. So I was like, oh yeah, I do remember that. And also, Pee-wee's Big Adventure is a Tim Burton movie, which is so funny to think about. And you kind of get that vibe a little bit. It's not overly bearingly, Tim Burton as we would know Tim Burton to be, but it's you get that vibe. Just like when you watch the two Michael Keaton Batman movies, those are both Tim Burton Batman movies. You kind of get that Tim Burton vibe with those movies. But that like face she makes, it's like the big wide mouth and it's the eyes and it's done in like a claymation kind of thing. And it's so random because Pee Wee Herman is this, the whole movie is supposed to be this happy kind of big adventure, right? As the title says, Pee Wee Herman is this incredibly goofy and sort of innocent character, right? However you want to feel about Pee Wee Herman. And then you get that random scene. It kind of reminds me of there's a scene in the Twilight Zone movie that's kind of like the same thing. It's got Albert Brooks and Dan Aykroyd in the scene. And Dan Aykroyd like shows this like he like pops around with like a scary face in the car, and but that's meant to be spooky. Twilight Zone's meant to be a little eerie and a little spooky. But every time I watched that scene as a kid, man, it just I remember like I said, it was in the back of my mind more so. When I saw the picture, it was like, oh yeah. It was like, oh yeah, that face. But when you realize that it's Tim Burton, also, I think it kind of made sense to me a little bit. It was like, okay, it's that Tim Burton's creepy factor, you know. But that was one that I just kind of vaguely remember as a kid. Next on the list, I had from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I had just Judge Doom, just in general. The whole him as a character, even before the whole the reveal as him being a toon, right, being a cartoon, with his whole vibe. He's against cartoons the whole time, and he kind of pops in, and he's got the dark coat and the dark fedora and the glasses on, and Christopher Lloyd is an absolute absolutely fantastic actor. And so to see him in this is perfect. And then obviously there's like the whole warehouse scene when dude, when they have like the acid and he like takes off the hat and he has like the little orange hair on top and takes the glasses off and he's got the crazy eyes and oh my gosh. If you didn't watch that movie, if you didn't watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit and got absolutely terrified from Judge Doom, then I don't know who you are. You're a soulless person. You're heartless. It was just I remember being so spooked out and like the screeching and the screaming and the high pitched voice that he does, I hated it. And it's one of those things where it's supposed to be spooky. The whole movie you're kind of in this it's not like a cartoon where it's all, Looney Tunes and, hunky dory Disney type cartoons. It's supposed to be like play on that stuff. It shows the what the cartoons do when the cameras aren't rolling. Always love that movie. Please. I I still do that till this day. One of my first impressions kind of was like Roger Rabbit. I love Christopher Lloyd and he always played like even in like Dennis the Menace, he was that vagrant and he was scary in that kind of. He was kind of meant to be a kind of a spooky character. And so he was perfect. He kind of is a cartoonish person too when you watch like Christopher Lloyd act, when you watch like Back to the Future, right? Doc Brown's basically just a cartoon. And then you get like Rick and Morty, and so you kind of realize that that's like the cartoon personified version of Doc Brown, kind of loosely based upon. Hmm. But that really, every kid in the late '80s that watched that movie, early '90s, whenever that movie came out, was terrified by that scene. Literally, the eyes. And it's a high pitched voice, it's the eyes. He's flying across the warehouse, and it's psycho. And he gets emulsified in the acid and he's screaming his head off. It's disturbing. It really is. That one was disturbing. Okay. Move, moving on. We got two more. So for the fourth one I had on my list, moving on up, I guess I could have switched this one around, but I do remember this one being scary. But it was in Willy Wonka, the movie, the whole tunnel scene, you know what I'm saying? That whole tunnel scene was insane. It breaks up that whole mood. You get this whole like light vibe before you get the songs with Oompa Loompas and Willy Wonka, and then they get on this boat and they're gonna head into this tunnel down the Chocolate River, and you're thinking of all this fun stuff, and then just the worst flip, just the most terrifying 180 you could ask for in a kids movie. It just Gene Wilder gets all serious and Gene Wilder is so fantastic in the certain nuances he does in performances, and it's just this. He slows himself down, kind of, and he like, no way of knowing where we are rowing. Just that, and it's spooky. And also, it doesn't help that literally everybody on the boat is like freaking out. It brings up that whole panic of the scene. It makes it so much more intense than it could ever be elsewise. And so, yeah, just that building, that intensity builds and all the visuals, right? All this flashing visuals and all the random stuff that gets played up on the walls of the tunnel, and it really is spooky. Maybe kids were a little more tough, back in the day, and they were okay with that stuff, and it wasn't that bad. But when I was a kid, it was spooky. It definitely freaked me out. And then after they get out the tunnel, it goes right back into being Willy Wonka's, what chocolate factory. It being this great, wonderful place with, all these kids playing around and da 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 da. But that was unsettling. And I think generally, like Gene Wilder's Willy Wonka is uber fantastic, but you do kind of get the sense of like disconnection with him, and it almost feels like he's a little bit of just disconnected. He gives us a really great performance nonetheless, and that's kind of that Gene Wilderness. He's just a goof, and he's super funny, and that movie just changed everything. And when I think about like novels that you read that have these super, very visual worlds that you read, and when you get them in screen and you hope that you do the best. And Willy Wonka, I think, really did great with that. I think it took what it was in the book and put it on screen. One of the best out of any movie ever. It makes you feel like you're really there and that all this fantastical stuff all this magical stuff is happening at the chocolate factory. But absolutely, that scene did not need to be there. They didn't need to go through the tunnel. They could have just had it open. It just could have been a nice ride through the chocolate river. And it's not even like a long it's not even supposed to be a long trip or whatever, right? It's not a long ride. It's just the whole spookiness. It's played to be this ever never ending thing. All right. Lastly on the list, I have this one was classic. I talk about this one with my dad all the time. But if you ever seen Indiana Jones and you ever seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, whenever the secret of the Ark of the Covenant is it's like this like light that comes out, right? And anybody that's not worthy that looks at it, their face melts off. And so one of the characters' name is it's Arnold Tot, right? I think or Totes. Ugh, I can't remember. It's hard. Yeah, this one I haven't seen Raiders of the Lost Ark in a while, but very vividly I remember that scene when they open up the top of the Ark of the Covenant, and all of a sudden it zooms in on the dude's face and it starts melting off. And that's the powers of the Ark. And when you watch that scene, it's like gnarly. I mean, it's not just like it doesn't look like some Play-Doh claymation thing. It literally looks like the dude's face is melting clean off. It was like the perfect execution of that, and very much so was just it's unbelievably spooky and it throws you off. Indiana Jones is just supposed to be a great action movie. Kind of different on the all than the other ones on my list. All the other ones on my list are the kind of comedies, and so this one's an action. And maybe you expect a spooky moment or a very serious, suspenseful, scary moment to happen once in a while in an action movie, but I don't think you expect someone's face to melt off in an action movie. And so it also just I think it perfectly encompassed like the powers of the Ark of the Covenant, right? It really showcased everybody wants it, and there's a reason, there's a desire for this because nobody can handle it. Nobody actually can see what's inside of it because anytime it's open, it unleashes this force, this essence that nobody's worthy of type thing. That scene's so intense, and Indy and the chick are like, tied up in the poles, and he's yelling, "Look away, please don't look! Like, close your eyes, do not look." Not just because your face is gonna melt off, but you're gonna see someone's face melt off. So Indiana Jones is trying to, he's just your average everyday archaeology professor, but then on a side hustle is, dude, that's so. I always thought dude, they should have never showed him as like a professor. Just make him a freaking treasure hunter. Done. We're done. That's all you need. We didn't need. He doesn't need to be a professor. He's finding all this cool, but it's because he wants to preserve history and yada yada yada. Whatever. But yeah, that's just five. I think five scary moments in non horrors. There's plenty of other ones, and I'm sure if I sat down and thought about more of like movies that I've seen and stuff like that, that there are plenty that would pop up. But I don't mind a little crossover. I don't mind a little scare when I'm watching a comedy or an action movie or whatever. It kind of adds something. It adds that little bit of a diversion. Lets the viewer know, are you really paying attention? Are you really focused in on the movie? In a sick, twisted way. Not everything is gonna go right. We don't know everything, and we're gonna make a few mistakes overextend ourselves to try to achieve something or just do something that doesn't go our way. But often we come with some sort of realization that we didn't see something before, that there was something there that was trying to teach us something, but we just didn't see. Or, maybe at the time we chose to ignore. Doing something wrong or being proven wrong is just a chance to learn a lesson. And I think learning a lesson is just taking in all the facts and all the information that you receive through the process of doing whatever, through the mistakes that you made and applying it. There's a lot of lessons to be learned. Often you realize that you're not going to always know things, right? You're not always going to be super capable at things. So, in a way, you're going to be wrong about stuff. And that's not ever on any one specific thing. Just because you're wrong on something doesn't mean that you're outrightly stupid or something like that, or it just might mean that you just weren't susceptible to something before. You just don't know some things, right? I don't know a lot of things, and I want to try to be as confident as possible, and I don't want to limit myself from doing so many things. So I'll hop into something and I'll try to do something thinking I'm more capable than I am, and often I'm proven that maybe not. Or I completed the task, but I just didn't like do it how it should be done or to its fullest extent. Also, I think there's plenty of information that I or things that I think of as informational or fact that not necessarily are. I kind of just have it like in my head already. But nonetheless, it's knowing differently. When you learn a lesson, when you've kind of learned that you've been wrong or you've learned from these mistakes, you just want to know differently. Or the end goal is to know differently. You got to have a willingness to learn, I suppose, really. You got to have a willingness to know. It's never an attack on directly on one aspect of yourself. You could also just not, you make a mistake on a couple things doesn't mean that you're going to make mistakes on other things. You also got to kind of remember that. But you also just always be willing to learn, even without a mistake. Be open to learning a lesson, even before you do anything. I like to ask questions, and I quite often suggest people do ask questions. Even when you think it's going to come off as a little simple or you think it's going to be stupid, but asking the question makes you know the information, hopefully, if you choose to learn that information. Because you can be ignorant 100%. You could choose to like ignore the lesson that's there. You kind of a little hard-headed, or you maybe were able to do something, or you kind of were going on your way for such a long time, or for however long it may be, and then it's just not the way anymore. Confidence builds into a lot of things. You may be able to help yourself out on a lot of things, or solve a lot of these problems, or you're very versed in information and you know a lot of things, but it doesn't mean you know everything. And quite often, if you then become wrong on something, that doesn't mean that then all the stuff that you do know is negated, right? But if you choose to be ignorant or ignore that lesson, then people don't want to think that you're very bright or very smart. I mean, it's not really a thing you don't have to be smart to everybody. Who cares if people view that in you? You just got to just believe in yourself that you're a little smarter than you are, that you're a little bit more capable than you are. There is 100% a harshness to the truth. There's a harshness to that realization once in a while, undoubtedly. Not always, really not always, but I think when that happens, that's what makes you ignore the lesson. You don't want to learn anything because it's a little bit of a harsh truth to learn, a little bit of a harsh lesson to learn. But you're gonna have to learn it. You're gonna have to know a truth. You're gonna have, there's a necessity for that. It is never to be more right than people, or people to view you as the most intelligent person or most capable person or whatever. We all want to be seen as a little capable, and you want to be a little intelligent. So you got to learn the facts. You got to put yourself through the learning process and learning a lesson. It's a necessity, and I think in discovering the truth in things and discovering the facts that help on achieving whatever it is that we achieve, or just generally knowing things that can help us in in a day-to-day aspect. And it depends also, I guess, sometimes how that lesson is brought to your attention, right? Sometimes, you're by yourself and you made some mistakes and all of a sudden things kind of come up and or you've always believed something or you overextended yourself and it just kind of naturally comes up. You get to like a certain point in the problem or the task that you're doing where you're kind of stuck. Then that's a good point to where then you're like, okay, maybe there is something I'm doing wrong and I need to learn something here. There's a lesson to be learned. Never in a like I always try to stress that it's never in a pointing, wagging your finger at yourself or at someone doing it to you. Because that can be hard is when people then tell you you're doing something wrong, right? People are telling you that you're making a mistake or, oh, this is not how you actually do something. So then someone brings the lesson to your attention. Someone says, hey, you need to learn up on this. Sometimes it feels a little blunt like that. And sometimes it is a little blunt like that. Sometimes people are like, hey, you're messing up, dude. You need to, you need to not. But nonetheless, I think there still is some sort of intention behind it to tell you, hey, there's a knowing, there's something different here that you need to know. A different way, a different solution. There's something you can learn here. Learning the lesson. Coming back to it. Sorry, I keep like a little indigestion. Sorry. But there's always room to learn. 100%. There's always going to be plenty of lessons to come up, right? That you're going to have plenty of chances to know things. And even when you're super versed on something and you've done something a bunch of times or everybody's kind of maybe iterated a certain thing to you, a certain piece of information or a certain truth, a certain fact or whatever, there's going to be lessons to learn in that. And I think that being prepared for it is never seen, never really capable, but when you have that willingness to learn and you open yourself up to the process of learning and processing the reality of knowing something different, then I think that helps out a lot of times. You're never really going to stop learning, and learning is always a chance to just know something a little bit better, to know something a little bit differently, to create a little depth in yourself as a person. Also, maybe even like gives yourself a chance to like teach that to other people, right? That's kind of a great thing is when you can kind of apply the lesson you learn. You can learn something, but then you don't understand it. But when you do understand it, then it makes it easy, or you hope that it makes it easy. The whole idea is that you're trying to open yourself up to something different. You got to kind of know that I've hit this barrier, or I've hit a block in whatever I was kind of thinking, or whatever I was kind of going through before, and I need to switch how I'm thinking about this thing. You're just sometimes some things are just unknown. Truly, you're not dumb. Some things just aren't always very, evident right off the bat to you. Things don't always show themselves right off the bat. You gotta dig a little bit, open yourself up to the realizations, know that something's there, and once you find it, you gotta take it all in and improve yourself on it. Teach yourself that all. It also teaches you that you can become capable at learning lessons in the future, making yourself susceptible to improvement and learning a few lessons on things. And it's always a good thing. It always helps you out. It always makes you a little bit better, and hopefully it gives you a little confidence in doing things in the future, not only in what you learned, but in other things, in adjacent problems and tasks and whatever it may be. But nonetheless, you always got to have that openness. You got to be willing to realize that sometimes you're going to be wrong or you're going to have mishaps and you're going to make mistakes, overextend yourself, whatever it may be. And you got to be willing to learn from that. No matter if it's a self realization or if it's someone bringing it to your attention. It may feel a little harsh, but I think seeking the right truth and picking up information is only going to better you as a person. So don't be scared to learn a lesson. And don't be scared to sometimes teach others those lessons. have a very sporadic sleep schedule. It feels like I'm really only sleeping like a few hours at a time, like 3 hours at a time. Often in the nighttime, I wake up through, the night a couple times, and I try to like make up for that with a midday nap. I try to sleep 2, 3 hours each time I sleep and think that equivocates to 6 to 8 hours. I love naps, but I know that it's maybe not necessarily a super healthy habit a super healthy habit to have. I don't think sporadic sleep is good for people necessarily, but maybe maybe there is some sort of science behind it. I was reading this article. It was an article done by Inverse. The author's name is Ilana Spivak, and it was an article that was talking about these polyphasic sleep cycles. And so I was kind of thinking, it kind of got me thinking about my specific sleep schedule and how often I sleep through the night and my nap through the day and the article was kind of talking about these different phases of sleeping, these different cycles that through time and history and through science that proven have worked for certain people at times and could be a solution to a different, sleep cycle. I was reading in this article that humans before savings slept with the waning and waxing of daylight in different seasons. So if it got a little darker earlier, then they went to sleep a little earlier, and if it got dark a little later, then they slept a little later, and if the sun rose a little later, then they woke up a little late. It was like things like that. So it kind of got it was kind of an interesting thing to think about that savings maybe has kind of predisposed a certain sleep schedule on people that you're supposed to sleep through the night when it's dark out and you're supposed to be awake when it's daytime. And also I think with like health that the whole circadian rhythm is that if you sleep through the night, these certain hours that it makes your body most productive during the daytime hours. But yeah, it was polyphasic sleep cycle is what they were talking about. And that there's these like different ways of sleeping that most people either do a monophase of sleeping, which is just one long rest. You sleep through the night, 6 to 8 hours, however that is. And then there's some people that do like me that do like biphasic, which is you have like most sleep through the night and then you have a nap. Even though I do wake up a couple times during the night, it's still that kind of biphasic, sleep through the night and have a nap during the day. And those are the kind of common ones. The most common is that monophase sleeping, where everybody just sleeps that 6 to 8 hours through the night. But I was kind of reading this article, it started highlighting a few other like w- phases, polyphasic sleep cycles that I thought were kind of cool. I thought that would be kind of fun to talk about. The first one they had was triphasic. So there's monophase, there's biphasic, and then there's triphasic. Triphasic is 3 sleep periods, one after dusk, one before dawn, and one to the middle of the day. Usually totaling about 5 hours, or like 4 to 5 to maybe 6 hours. And so that's kind of like, I can understand that, So right after the sun kind of sets, you sleep for a couple hours. Uh, yeah, and then yeah, so you sleep for a couple hours, 2 to 3 hours, and then after right before the sun rises, you sleep for a couple hours, and then just the middle of the day, whatever that middle of the day is. So that's kind of interesting. I thought that was all right. I kind of it almost feels like that's how some people kind of function, right? If especially well, if you don't have a job on maybe like a day off, wake up early and you got stuff to do, and you get home and you take a nap at like 11 or 12. Then you wake up and do a few more things, and you pass out at like 6, 7 o'clock. Then all of a sudden you're awake in the middle of the night and you're up for multiple hours. Then you fall asleep again at 3 o'clock until until the daylight comes back. So that's kind of, I think that's something that a lot of people do as well. And maybe seems a little bit of a sense more, it's not too far off of the sensicalness for me. It feels like that's kind of weird to kind of start scheduling your sleep, but if that's what some people like nature of their body when you start to feel tired at these certain periods, if you can sleep for a couple hours at a time at these times of day, then why not? Maybe you're a triphasic sleeper. And then the next one on there was it was called Every Man Sleep Cycle. Every Man Sleep Cycle was you sleep 3 hours at night, and then you sleep three or you take three 20-minute naps throughout the day, totaling a whole 4 hours throughout the total day. So like I don't know what 3 hours at night. I don't know specifically what like the best hours to do are, but then you take three 20-minute naps through the day. So like if you go to work, maybe on your lunch break, and then right when you get home, and then maybe like before dinner, something like that. That just seems 20 minutes for me at least is like too short of a nap. I don't think I even fall asleep really in 20 minutes. So I would just be laying there just with my eyes closed, which may be really the point of like kind of the resting state of your body, just, putting yourself in a state of rest is always more so the point of these kind of sleep cycles and stuff like that. But 3 hours at night and then three 20-minute naps a day, a total of 4 hours, which is like, that's just not enough. They always say like 6 hours is like the perfect thing. So maybe you can adjust it your own. Maybe you do like, 45-minute naps, three 45-minute naps or whatever. Make it like 5 hours almost. That just seems, it's just too little for me. But also, like, what's the best like 3 hours to sleep at night? It says 3 hours at night, but is it just whatever 3 hours you can do? Is it right after sunset or is it right before sunrise? It wasn't very specific. The third one that was on the list was that it talked about was Ubermensch. Ubermensch is like a is German. I think it means Superman, literally. But that one, this one is 30-minute naps every 4 hours. So in your 24-hour cycle, let's say from 12 to 4 you're awake, and then you take a 30-minute nap, and then from 4:30 to 8:30 you're awake, and then you take a 30-minute nap, and then what I'm saying, that on and on. That kind of, if you had the freedom in your schedule to do so, then I guess why not? Again, it totals 4 hours throughout the day. Maybe you can up it a little bit yourself and you do 45 minutes each time or an hour each time. But just to think that, like, how can you, if you had the free time, I guess, right? If you, based on what you do through the day, if that was kind of what you were able to do, every 30 minutes every 4 hours. Again, 30 minutes seems, at least to me, too short of a nap time. Maybe for some people that's the perfect time period, but it's just too short for me. And to schedule your sleep every just like every 4 hours you get an alarm that goes off and you just have to get up and go to your bed or wherever you are if you're running errands through the middle of the day and your alarm goes off and it's like, hey, nap time, and so you're just in your car sleeping. I've literally done that before where like I just kind of was running errands all day and I'm a little tired and I don't really want to go home, and because I know I won't go back out once I go home, that I'll just park up and sleep for a few minutes for sleep for an hour. Like I said, 30 minutes is too short for me. And then the last thing the last sleep cycle they were talking about in the article was called Dymaxion. I think that's how you pronounce it. And then that one is 30-minute naps every 6 hours, which totaling like what would be like 3 hours of sleep total. That's that seems deprived. That literally at this when you get to like the last two here, this Ubermensch and then the Dymaxion, that this feels like sleep depravity. It feels like you're not getting any sleep at all. But I guess for some people that's how they function, right? I guess. And I can see, especially if you're someone that has the mindset of, you're not necessarily a day person or like you're not necessarily a nighttime person, you kind of function, similarly throughout the day, that's not a bad idea. 30 minutes is still too short of a nap time though. But all those kind of got me thinking about It makes me feel a little bit less bad about my sleep schedule in a way that and it's science proven in a way that people have tested these sleep cycles and they've written their reports on it and they've said what they've said about it, but I guess you kind of got to try it, just like with most science, that you kind of got to try it for yourself. I don't think I'm gonna take a 30-minute nap every 4 hours or every 6 hours, but maybe if I sleep 3 hours through the night and, I end up waking up and I stay up for a few hours and then maybe I take like an hour nap and then stay up for a few hours and I take another hour nap and then stay up for a few hours, whatever, something like that. The triphasic and every man sleep cycles don't seem so crazy to me. It kind of seems like stuff that people do, and if you were the type, like I said, the type of person that maybe found that you're productive throughout the day, or that you don't really have a specific time of day that you feel most adequate, or you feel like you can do things the best to your abilities at, then why not try a little bit of sporadic sleep? It gets me thinking that maybe if I slept like 2.5 hours every time, or like 2 hours every time, that I'd get 6 hours eventually. But I know that I've also learned that with your circadian rhythm, that long sleep throughout the night really sets you up for like the daytime. And if you do need to sleep throughout the day, that 30-minute naps are kind of like that premium spot, or at least like 30-minute intervals or something like that. So like 30 minutes or an hour or an hour and a half or something like that. But it was interesting. I know that I'm sure that y'all all suffer from the same thing, or some of y'all do, that it's not always easy to get to sleep in and you feel a little tired midday, or you're kind of restless at night. Maybe switching up the sleep cycle doesn't hurt. Trying some of these weird ones or coming up with your own schedule might be okay. Just figuring, as long as you get a good amount of sleep throughout the day and you feel rested, I think that's number one most important thing. Alrighty, friends. That's really all I have to say about that. Episode 27 in the bag, done. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you want to listen to episode 27 or any of my other episodes, I'll always post them up on YouTube or Spotify podcast for your enjoyment. If you also maybe even found it a little bit relatable and you want to show a little love or support, then you can subscribe to the podcast as well. I'm very grateful for any love and support that I can get. I also am on a bunch of different social medias. I have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. All those will be in the description, and also at the end of the video will be the names for all those. Like I said, any support, any love shown, I am very grateful for, and I just want to try to reach out to as many people as possible, and try to reach out to the people that this content will mean the most to. But yeah, I love y'all. Thank you for stopping by. Make sure to show up for yourselves every single day and be excellent to each other.